Over the past 10 years that I've been active on YouTube, I've learned 67 fingerstyle guitar songs. That's just the number that's in my playlist. Actually, on guitar, I've learned well over 100 songs. And you might think that the most tough part of learning all of these songs was the technique. But I in fact found 5 surprising things which I'm going to talk about in this video, which completely transformed the way that I learned fingerstyle guitar songs. These key insights not only improved my fingerstyle guitar playing, but also helped me understand where I was going wrong when I first started learning these challenging songs. And one of these discoveries could be the breakthrough that you are looking for. Starting with the first thing that I realized after learning over 100 songs to play on fingerstyle guitar, and I wish I'd learned this thing earlier because I still get comments on this video where I play Sung Ha Jung's song Gravity, and if you've watched the video, you can probably guess what this thing is. The problem with the way that I used to learn fingerstyle guitar songs is that I would only use the metronome at the end of my learning process. So I'd already learned the whole song, and then I would set a metronome to try to play along with it. That's why the tempo for the song Gravity is so wonky in some places, and why so many people have pointed that out. So for instance, in the song Gravity, at the end of one phrase and the start of a new one, I would have a tendency of slowing down the end of phrases, especially if they had a big shift like here. And then at the start of the new one, speeding up the tempo a little bit, especially if there were like a hammer on with an arpeggio like that. So I had locked in certain parts of the song at the wrong tempo, and when it came time to play the whole song at exactly the same tempo, I was trying to rush to catch up with the parts which I had learned slower, and then slow down the parts that I had already learned faster. So now my breakthrough is to set the metronome right at the very start of my practice and learn everything at the proper tempo. Now for advanced fingerstyle songs, obviously you can't set the tempo right off the bat to full speed, play through the entire song and expect to get everything perfectly. But you can make sure you have an idea of what the final song should be by setting your metronome close to what the speed is, and then playing through sections of the song, for instance the chorus or the introduction. Doing this lets you know what the tricky bits are, which you need to practice at a slower tempo. And if you can't play the song at full speed, you can also play sections of the song at half time, which means you just play it at twice what the normal tempo is supposed to be. The whole point of using the metronome is not to fall in the trap that I did, which is thinking certain parts of the song are too fast or too slow, when in reality that's just the way that you practice them. But how do you know how fast a song should be? This brings me to my next point, which caused a huge mess, and I had to go back and clean things up later on. So one of the things that you'll see displayed prominently at the start of tablature is the metronome marking, which tells you how fast the song should be played at. But because I wasn't taking the metronome as seriously as I do now in my practice, some of the indications that I had put on my tablature were wildly off. These are the tablatures for River Flows in You, which I've been practicing. And you can see up here, this is the tempo that I'm going to play it at, so between 58 and 66. But the tempo that I had originally written on the tablatures, 96. That's way off. Just to give you an idea, this is what 96 is. This meant that I had to go back and correct the tempo markings on pretty much all of my tablature, starting from the very beginning, and playing along the recording and using a site that lets you tap the BPM to actually put the correct tempo markings on the tablature. Now when I'm learning a new song, I'll put a tempo marking which is slightly slower than what the actual tempo is, and that's what I always set my metronome to at every practice. It gives me a good speed to practice a song which isn't too fast or too slow either. The next thing that I took for granted, but now I realize was a huge mistake, was something that I kind of referred to earlier, and that's the issue of accurate tablature. I was a bit lazy, and I wasn't always checking the accuracy of the tabs that I was using. Now, the tabs that I were using weren't all bad, and they do a pretty good job if you're trying to make your own transcription. But I'm kind of OCD when it comes to written notation, and I like the written notation to accurately reflect what is being played in the recording or on the video. This can be just as simple as correcting a note that should be played on the 3rd string when it says that it's played on the 6th. So now I make sure I go ahead and either create my own tablatures from scratch or check every single note that's in any tablature that I find online before I start learning. Another problem that I found is difference in notation style. This user records rasguiato as happening before the beat, whereas what I'll do in my tablature is write rasguiato notes on the first beat and then put a squiggly line in front of the chord to indicate that it's supposed to be played as rasguiato. Rasguiato can give the impression of starting before the first beat. For instance, like this. And 1, 2, 3, 4, and 1, 2, especially if you take the time to really flick out your fingers. What do you think? Do you agree with my approach? Comment below. And if you're interested in learning more about notation in tablature, I have a guide that you can use which specifically addresses fingerstyle guitar tablature, and the link is in the description. Otherwise, if you want more information on the technique that I just demonstrated, the rasguiato technique, you can check out this video, and I'll see you in the next video.